What's up guys, it's Manga Time once again. I'm here today to bring you my review of Bleach 618, The Dark Arm. This chapter's good, not great. It's not as exciting as the last two chapters, that's for sure. I get the distinct feeling almost there's a bit of stalling going on here. Like Kubo wants to move on, but doesn't want to move on too fast. And I think he's afraid of almost rushing. But like when you put things into perspective, we are actually going quite slowly. When you consider that Yhwach stabbed the Soul King in chapter 611, that's almost 2 months away, and we pretty much haven't moved away from that spot. But you know, whatever. I don't mind too much because lots of interesting stuff is unfolding just slowly. But it starts off with Aizen and Shunsui, thank God, and things are, you know, pretty interesting between them. Their dialogue is good. It maybe could have been better, but it's definitely interesting between the two of them. Anyway, Aizen's just very typically Aizen, in a way. It starts off with him like, you know, being, what's wrong? I thought you had 2 keys left. And then Shunsui uses the 2 keys, and he's kind of like, well, that makes I've now used 3 of them. And you know, Shunsui's being typically blasé about the situation. He's throwing up a front. He's not really letting Aizen get near him, which is cool. And he's like, you know, so how do you feel after being freed after so long? And Aizen comments that Shunsui hasn't changed, which in some ways is true, but I feel in more ways it's not so true. Because Shunsui's become a darker character since having to take on the role of Captain Commander, which, you know, is interesting. And so he asks Aizen if he wants to leave this place, which I think, again, is interesting. Lots of people predicted that Shunsui, although he said he was only allowed to use 3 keys, was actually going to use all of them anyway. And it looks like that was going to happen. Aizen then says, you know, I don't remember asking you to let me out. And then Shunsui says, well, if you didn't want to leave, you wouldn't have told me to use the remaining keys on you. And so, basically, we get some interesting... Aizen sees straight through Shunsui now. Because, as you know, you kind of expect from Aizen. He's like, why would you go to such lengths to bring the keys in here if you weren't going to free me? Because obviously Shunsui has all of the keys. Which, again, is something some other people said. And, you know, Shunsui comments, yeah, okay, you saw right through me. And then we get something pretty random, actually. Shunsui pulls his Shakusha open, and he's got this massive scar on his chest, and apparently the Central 46 made him hide the keys inside his body. That seems pretty... that's pretty rough, that's pretty elaborate. And he was only allowed to free 3 parts of Aizen. And Aizen predicts that the Central 46 made him do that, because if Shunsui were to be killed, then the doors to Muken would forever seal, and Aizen would never escape. So Aizen realised that Central 46 predicted that he might try and kill Shunsui, get the keys off him, and escape. So they made it so the keys were inside Shunsui, so that if he was killed, they would know, and they would seal the doors forever. And, you know, it's quite funny, because Aizen just kind of like, that lot in the Central 46. And he's kind of like, he says it like, you know, like, you know, remembering, obviously we know that Aizen killed the first lot of Central 46 guys. But, I think, although Aizen said that Shunsui hasn't changed, I think this marks a bit of a difference in character for Aizen himself. I don't want to say that he's abandoned his dream of ruling the Soul Society, but it's possible that he's not going about it in such a, I want to say roundabout way. Because if you remember in the Fate Karakotan arc, he wasn't going to kill anyone apart from Yamamoto. Like, he was like, I'm going to rule all of you now. But now he seems to have obviously harbouring some real bad feelings toward the Soul Society, so much so that he would be willing to kill Shunsui to get what he wants, which I think is quite an interesting, more vicious change to his character. But Shunsui's, you know, he says, you know, think of it as I'm doing it for the sake of Soul Society, and let's leave things at that. And then he, you know, brings us to the main point. He wants Aizen to sit on his little chair that he got locked up in the first place, and then be taken up to the Soul Society. And there's a bunch of other dudes here. I'm not sure if these guys are the Kido Corp or not, I can't actually remember. But it's the guys with the face masks that, you know, transport prisoners, basically. They might just be part of the 2nd Division, because there are some jailers and stuff like that, but I don't actually know. But anyway, Shinsui's like, you know, it's been a while since you've been out to the Soul Society for some fresh air. So obviously he is planning on taking Aizen up, but he does want Aizen to be bound. Now, I don't know if that's just to keep up appearances, or if Shunsui generally wants Aizen to be binded. But then we had, for some reason, this complete noob comes out of nowhere who apparently didn't get the memo that you don't just run up to the most dangerous prisoner in all of Soul Society and try and bind him without your superior's permission. So this complete clown comes out of nowhere and he's like, "Pardon me, I need to bind him once more before he sits down." And Shinsui's like, "You might not want to do that." But this guy learns the hard way, and we actually get a piece of information that I wasn't expecting. I wasn't expecting it at all. And he pays for the price in a rather spectacularly gruesomely fashion. He tries to put the bindings on Aizen, but as he gets close to Aizen, he loses his fucking fingers. Like, all of his fingers come off, and basically loses half of his hand. My split instinct was Aizen cut them off, but then I was like, wait a second, that's not what's happening here. And what is happening here is that Aizen is apparently still transcendent. I did not see that coming at all. So the dude has tried to touch Aizen and he's just lost his body because Aizen's reiatsu is still able to dissolve people on touch. Presumably someone like Shunsui would be able to get a little bit closer because, Gin was able to get properly close to Aizen before he lost a bit of his hand. Aizen actually had to touch his arm to dissolve his arm in the final battle. So it does appear that Aizen is still as powerful as he was before, which is absolutely mental, and that completely changes the game, because I thought he was going to be, powerful still, but not the transcendent being that he was before. But it appears that he still is, which is mental, and the only reason I can presume that is because the Hogyoku is still inside him, and although they're not best buddies anymore, or they might be now, but at least they weren't the last time we knew about it. Despite that, the Hogyoku still, its attributes still, they're all still part of Aizen. So this dude now has to be content with the fact that he's just lost half of his hands. And it's so gruesome, and I really like this, because when Aizen was around, Bleach had the anime, and so there had to be a lot of censoring going on. And we all know the final arc has been spectacularly more gruesome than the rest of the manga. And now I want to see Aizen do some gory shit, because when he was a villain, he never did any real nasty stuff. Well, he did do some, but this dude's already lost his hands. When we saw Aizen before he got sealed away, he was walking through Karakura Town and he was chopping dudes in half with his reiatsu, but we never really properly saw it. Now though, stuff is getting gory, man. It's good. But anyway, Aizen's typically badass. He's like, how much of a fool do you think I am? These binds don't erase my reiatsu. They simply keep it around me. So basically, the bindings stop his reiatsu from being able to affect anyone else. And now that he's taken the bindings off, it's just ripping people up again. And it's embarrassing how thoughtless you've become. And it's just it's so badass. It's typical Aizen, just putting everyone down. But he's got a point, the Soul Society has gotten weaker. But anyway, he's take a good look at what will happen if you try and come near me. And then he turns his attention back to Shunsui, and he's basically, Shunsui, what you're saying is the moment I sit on that chair and follow you outside, I'm supposed to lend my powers to help Soul Society. Is that what you think's going to happen? So Aizen's got some reservations about this, but I think in the end he's going to do it anyway. Shunsui's I didn't say anything about you needing to fight for Soul Society, but he twists it, typical Shunsui. He's I didn't say anything about you needing to fight for Soul Society, but I think you can see the advantages and disadvantages of the worlds blowing up are quite similar for both of us. And Aizen gives us very typical Aizen dialogue, which is, you really are a very interesting one, which is very typical of just kind of old Bleach. Aizen, all the really super intellectual characters talking to each other. That's very typical. And then we get a close-up of his eye, which I presume is just him kind of considering what to do next. And he's like, do I really want to breathe some of that fresh air, you ask? And then he sort of throws it back at Shunsui. But I also think it's Aizen confirming that he doesn't want Yhwach around. He says, what fresh air could I possibly get from the Soul Society now that Yhwach's done with it? Implying that Aizen thinks Yhwach has defiled the Soul Society. And we obviously get to see the Vandenreich as it's taken over the Soul Society. So Aizen is on his way out of Muken. That's awesome. I cannot wait to see him up and about doing some crazy shit. And now that I know he's still transcendent, I'm almost more certain now that he's going to become a villain again, which is sweet. But unfortunately, we have to move away from Aizen. We go back to the palace. And the palace stuff is good. Don't get me wrong, but it's very slow. It is taking ages, I think. It feels like it's taking ages for anything to happen. And everything is so vague. It's all so vague still. But Yhwach tries to grab, right, at least attack Mimihagi. But some barrier comes out of nowhere. Like, I don't know if that's Mimihagi doing it. I presume it is. But it stops Yhwach. And, you know, he's like, I didn't think you yourself would become an obstacle. And he's like, and apparently a severed hand from the Soul King's body no longer follows his will. Or at least that seems to be what Yhwach says, but then I don't really know. But then he says, you know, I'll destroy that hand along with you once and for all. So it's nice that the Soul King technically is still alive. Even if it's just his arm. However, Ichigo grabs Yhwach's arm and pushes it out of the way. I mean, there's some pretty nice dynamic panels now. And I have to say the artwork in this chapter is phenomenal. So, and okay, unfortunately some of these panels are a little bit messy though. So it gets a little bit difficult to decipher what goes on in a minute. So I'll try my best. Ichigo grabs Yhwach's arm and he pushes it aside. And there's a lot of, like, black stuff flying around. And I think that's important. I'm not sure. But, and this is very interesting. Yhwach doesn't actually do anything to Ichigo. He just tells him to move. He's like, move, Ichigo. And I've always loved the way he calls him Ichigo. Because it's very, like, parental. Just calling him by his first name. Whereas, like, Ginjo used to call him Kurosaki, apart from when they were friends. And Aizen's always called him Kurosaki Ichigo, or just like Ryoka. But Yhwach just calls him Ichigo, and that's very parental. We already know that Yhwach is like the All-Father, and I quite like that. And it is almost like he doesn't want to hurt Ichigo in a way, but I do think he probably would to get what he wants. But anyway, so Ichigo but it's also interesting that Ichigo doesn't go for the attack on Yhwach, instead he just pushes him out of the way. And it's pretty random that Yoruichi's razor wires have just seemed to have vanished, but whatever. Speaking of Yoruichi, as Ichigo pushes Yhwach's hand out of the way, she dives past them and she whips out this Kido spell, which is pretty awesome, even though it's like not named or anything. But it's very cool seeing her do like an enchantment. She's like, you know, good work, Ichigo, and then she kind of does that, and then she, like, starts drawing it on the floor. It's cool. I like it. I like Kido. Kido needs to be done more. And it, like, creates a barrier around the Soul King. I don't really know what she's trying to do. Maybe she's just protecting him. But, she's like, so this black blob is the Soul King's arm, huh? And then she's like, you know, if he really did manage to stabilize the Soul King just by holding on to him, we will make that the new Soul King. So... And then she starts building like 2 barriers around him. There's like a first barrier, which looks like a bog standard Kido barrier. But then there is a second, more elaborate looking barrier forming over the crystal. So it's possible that she's creating, because we know the Soul King was inside a crystal anyway. So it's possible she was creating a new crystal to make a new Soul King. It's pretty crazy that Yoruichi's able to do that. We already know the Shihoin clan has some ties to the Royal Palace anyway, because we know that Yushido brought that heavenly armor thing. One other thing I want to point out quickly is that I hadn't actually noticed this before, but the Soul King's crystal was not hollow. I thought it was just going to be an outer crystal and the Soul King would be floating in the center of it. But the crystal's not hollow, man. That thing packs all the way into the center. So I think that's, you know, a point to be noted, even though I don't really know what relevance that necessarily has yet. But Yhwach doesn't seem to be too bothered about this. He actually is focusing on Ichigo, and he's like, Ichigo, why are you getting in my way? And then I don't understand what happens. We see Yhwach's hand, and we see Ichigo's hand, and Yhwach says, you're the one that cut the Soul King in half, and I can't tell what happens. It looks like Ichigo's hand suddenly gets hurt, and all that black stuff is moving around, which I presume is the blute. It's possible that Yhwach controls Ichigo's arm and takes his arm off of him. Yhwach then gives us the old line, that Quincy blood that flows within you shouldn't be able to overlook an existence like the Soul King. Why? Why don't you just tell us? It's like, we've already know that. You've told us that twice now. Why don't you tell us why? It's the vagueness of it all is actually a little bit annoying. That's what I mean by Kubo seems to be trying to stall a little bit. He keeps repeating the same vague lines over again. It's all very cryptic, and I wish we'd just get some bloody answers. But I do kind of think that might happen when Aizen turns up, so that'd be cool. And so Yhwach's like, so what reason do you have to stop me now? And we get some pretty badass pictures of Ichigo. He's like, I came here to put an end to you. And then I don't really understand what's going on in this panel either. Like, something really weird is going on with Ichigo's face. I can't really tell. It's like, I don't know, the manga stream version will probably be a bit easier to see. But, you know, Ichigo's like, I came here to protect everyone. And Yhwach's like, protect everything? That's pretty greedy. Are you saying you're the only one that can do that? And I quite like that, because he's kind of calling Ichigo out on Ichigo's protection complex. But anyway, Ichigo then basically does throw it back at him. He says that even if it was someone else's job, there's no reason I need to turn away from all of this. Which I quite like. And then Yhwach's just kind of like, okay. And then Ichigo uses Getsuga Tenshou. And I don't know if this is an art issue or what, but for some reason the Getsuga's black. Getsuga hasn't been black for a long time. Getsuga hasn't been black, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, since the Aranka arc. Pretty much since Mugetsu, I don't think. Because ever since Ichigo got his powers back, and his powers have kind of been more, like, stable, what they actually should be, it's been white. But for some reason, maybe it's an art mistake, but he fires a black Getsuga and he decimates the king's palace. The king is not going to be happy if he makes it out of this. But, yeah, it blows a massive hole in the palace wall. And, yeah, Ichigo's like, you know, Yhwach, I heard the blood that flows within me comes from you, but so what? And we see that Ichigo's arm is damaged, and I don't know what's going on here, because I don't know when Ichigo's arm was damaged. Like, did Yhwach damage Ichigo's arm and take it off him? But even so, we didn't see it, I don't think. There's speculation on the forums that Ichigo attacked himself with Getsuga, or it's possible, this has just come to me, it's possible that Yhwach's blute forced Ichigo to keep hold of his arm, so when Ichigo gets to Yhwach, he hit himself as well to break them apart. It's really hard to say. I don't actually know. Maybe it'll be clear in the manga stream one. We get a good picture of Ichigo's face though, and he's like, I won't do your bidding over something just like that. I'm surprised Ichigo hasn't brought up his mum yet. Hopefully that comes up soon, because it seems like a good point of contention between them. But then the chapter ends again very cryptically with Yhwach going, you're not going to do my bidding? What a joke. Whether you'll do it or not is all up to these eyes of mine. And we get a very sinister Ginjo Aizen type face of Yhwach, where his face is all shadowed and he looks pretty nasty. And that's the end of the chapter, really. So again, not as great as the last two. I'm probably going to give this one 8, simply because not that much happened again, and it wasn't even as interesting as last 2 weeks. Aizen was cool, as always. Seeing him and Shunsui talk was great. They didn't really talk about much, but it was still good. It was still good. And the Ichigo Yhwach thing was okay. The action was good, but we need answers, goddammit. We need a flashback. That's what I'm going to say every week. I'm going to say it every week. What does the last panel mean? Yhwach says, whether you'll do it or not is all up to these eyes of mine. Now, let me just take us back a couple of chapters to 614. We know that Ichigo was controlled to attack the Soul King. And Yhwach at the time said it was because of his blood. And now Ichigo's saying, you know, I'm not going to do it because of the blood, which is bollocks because it's already happened. But, well, it was at least because of Yhwach's reiatsu. And now Yhwach says it's all up to these eyes of mine. There's only 2 reasons that come to my mind straight away as to what Yhwach means here. Either he means that his eyes have some funky hypnotic power that's going to control Ichigo, or he's talking about the fact that he's a Quincy. And those eyes are, you know, Quincy eyes. And again, it all comes down to the Quincy blood, the Quincy reiatsu, etc., and he can control Ichigo like that. That's kind of the only thing I can think of, is that because they're Quincy eyes, that kind of relationship between them means that he can control him. So I think that's possible. But I have to be honest, I don't really know what he means by Ichigo doing his bidding. I mean, like, I don't necessarily think they're going to fight just yet. This still doesn't feel like a final battle to me. I definitely think they're going to clash again later on. Whether Yhwach's going to take over Ichigo immediately, I don't know. But it's possible. He might do. This, like I said, this doesn't feel like a final fight. The Elite Sturmiter haven't even come back yet, so God knows where the hell they are. I hope Kubo hasn't forgotten about them, and then we get like a tiny 2-chapter fight from them or something because he has to rush. I don't think he has, though. He seems, in my opinion, he's doing a better job in this arc of not forgetting his shit. But yeah. So that's it from me this week, guys. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of this week's chapter. What do you think of Aizen and Shunsui's conversation? What do you think Aizen is up to? And what do you think Shunsui's up to? Because they're both pretty conniving. And I really hope that Aizen comes up in time to see everyone off, because they're not going to be happy. But yeah, and what do you think Yhwach means by whether or not Ichigo's going to do his bidding is up to his eye, is up to Yhwach's eyes. You know, it is possible. You would think it's a major deal because Kubo ends the chapter on it, so it's possibly going to be a pretty big deal next week. But yeah, that's all from me this week, guys. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. As always, guys, please subscribe. That'd be great, and give the video a thumbs up. That'd be awesome. I'd really appreciate it. But until next week, guys, see you later.